Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome into the show. So today's guest, I'm going to say a name, Dr. Robert Troutwine. Maybe is not somebody that, right away you know who he is. He's not somebody who, quite frankly, Brandon even does a lot of self-promoting, especially in consideration of all the great things that he's done. But you may know Dr. Troutwine as the developer of his namesake assessment, the Troutwine Athletic Profile, which is known more commonly as TAP. And it's an athletic assessment that measures the mental intangibles important for success in sports. For over 30 years, he's been working primarily as a research and development psychological scientist with pro sports organizations, military, corporations, all kinds of different law firms and teams. You may have heard of some of his clients, New England Patriots. Ever heard of them? Sprint, U.S. Navy SEALs, and he's best known, I should say, for his work in sports. He coached football in the early 80s before he was hired by the Kansas City Chiefs in 1984. And since then, he's independently consulted with dozens of professional and college sports teams on such topics as assessment, coaching, and the development of athletes. And then in 2019, Dr. Troutwine co-founded Riser Mindset to bring his proprietary TAP assessment to the global athletic market. And thanks to you, we're fortunate enough to have him as a guest on our show.
Yeah, amazing, right? And so, for the listeners, it kind of came about because my son was taking this TAP assessment, and it's really interesting. Look, he's a freshman, and early on in some of the recruiting stuff, and one of the recommendations was, hey, you should go out to Riser and have him take this test because, at 14, and he even talks about this, right? At 14, some of these either mindsets or the type of quote unquote athlete from a mental makeup and emotional makeup haven't fully crystallized. And so it's really, really cool to see what they're offering, both the athletes, the parents, the teams that you talked about, colleges. I mean, it's amazing the accuracy at which this is. It's not after you hear Dr. Troutwine, but
right.
When I got the report back, you sit there and you go, oh, wow. Like, wow. Yeah. Okay. I mean, they nailed it, but then, and you start talking to him and you realize like, there's a reason that he was doing jury selection stuff. Yeah. There's a reason that he was doing, assessments and I wouldn't call it profiling, but, got pulled into some stuff based upon just his knowledge base and how to use that data and all that. So it's a really, really interesting assessment. I would encourage all of the listeners to go out. I don't see there being any way that you couldn't find it beneficial, both personally and for if you have a kid that's trying to compete at a higher level.
Yeah. I kept thinking as I was listening to him that there's a reason that these professional sports teams that are making these high stakes decisions on draft day, whether it be NFL, MLB, whatever, are, hiring him for some of his insights and using these TAP assessments because, and I don't want any spoilers, but you're going to hear on this episode where there are some pretty major decisions that he was a part of based on, some of the TAP scores and the TAP assessments. And it's incredible.
Yeah, it is, especially when we talk about one in particular. And I remember that being for months leading up to the NFL draft. Oh my gosh, who are they going to take? It's,
right.
And it played a role.
Yeah, no question about it. So, and again, I mean, it's really, you can tell through the course of the conversation, what comes through loud and clear is his passion for understanding the information that he's been able to gain as a researcher and seeing the trends that are going on right now with youth athletes, with some of the mental makeup challenges, the anxiety, some of the mental health issues and stuff. And I'm talking not just in college, but even beforehand, before they even get to college. And that's something he's very passionate about. I mean, yes, the majority of his time and career has been spent at those higher levels, but now he's starting to really see how these tools and resources can be used for parents and coaches to help with their young athletes like yourself, who still have some young athletes and,
Oh, you mean I'm not the young athlete? Oh,
yeah.
I thought.
Yeah. And then giving
right.
the insights into how to deal with it. So really cool stuff.
Really cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, get your pen and paper ready. Here is Dr. Robert Troutwine. Well, Dr. Troutwine, welcome to the show. We've really been looking forward to this conversation. Everyone is looking for that edge. I mean, that's one of the things that you talk about on your website, the Riser Mindset website, where coaches, players, parents, business leaders, whatever the case may be, everybody's looking to find that separator that's going to give them that competitive advantage. And most coaches, though, and the business leaders and parents don't know how to evaluate the mental game. And so that's what was really intriguing as we started to kind of unfold and research a little bit about your background and the TAP and the introduction. I wanted to start by asking you just where did this interest in learning about the athletic mindset come from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And frankly, it was like swimming upstream because when I went through all my training and everything, the field of psychology, positive psychology didn't exist. And I was a pain in the neck student on the front row, and the teacher's talking about this function and that one, and I'm raising my hand like, well, wait, what about Wilma Rudolph? The doctor said she'll never walk again, and we know the rest of that story. Not only did she walk, she ran and she won the Olympics, and she was a black athlete, and putting up with all that and everything. And so they're like, oh, we don't talk about that. So it was a lonely journey, let me tell you. But I was always interested in high profile, high pressure, high performers. And, so that was the quest that really my whole career took me on, was following those people. And then I started off as a physicist. A lot of people thought, you must be this or that. But my heroes were astronauts. And you had to have a lot of physics and calculus. And so I was kind of the geek. But anyhow, a lot of it's science-based. But, like I said, my purpose in life was to figure out, the ingredients, the DNA, if you will, of these high performers, these exceptional people, that nobody, when I started, were talking about. I took organizational behavior and MBA courses, and they would talk about group decision making. And guess what we studied? The Bay of Pigs fiasco. It's like, wait, what about Freddie Laker? His professor gave him a bad grade on his whole outline for FedEx, but he had it right there. And, the rest is history. So amazing human beings.
Yeah.
So, Doctor, so for our listeners, if you have an opportunity, for sure, go out, especially our athletes and the parents of our athletes, go out to Riser, RYZER, to the website and take the TAP test, right? Because it's named after you, right, Doc? It's a Troutwine Aptitude
Athletic Profile.
Athletic Profile. And
Yeah.
I can tell you from personal experience, and this is kind of what really interests me. My son took it 2 weeks ago, and if you sat down with him, when I read, he was a musketeer, by the way. So as I'm going through it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's amazing from a profile perspective. What kind of got you down the profile? Because not only have you done athletic stuff, but you were telling us as well, you've been on jury selections and murder cases and things like that, where profiling becomes kind of essential. What was that thing that really kind of drove you towards the profile side of things?
Right. And, number one, there's not very many of us, but, I was trained. So that's why I mentioned the physics and the calculus. And so, the whole thing is like questionnaire design, survey, scales. A lot of people throw me in the category of personality tests, which I don't care. But then I also, designed aptitude tests, which, could be like I developed a teller test for the banking industry. So anyhow, that was my skill set. And I developed, like for Ford Motor Company, a 40-question survey, and it would tell you how many units plus or minus 2 a person would sell a month, and if they were better suited for used or new car sales. But it's real, like I said, it's real geeky science, because you throw a bunch of stuff at a population like Ford Motor salespeople, see who the top performers are, and then compare that to, your questions and your scales and everything. So when I got hired by the Chiefs, at first I just used an off-the-shelf test called the 16PF, which is very popular. But at the same time, I had all these scales that I had been developing since undergrad days, going back to Wilma Rudolph. So I had a lot of skills that I thought were promising in predicting these high performance people across different things like, sales and sports. And so it became abundantly obvious that the 16PF wasn't doing it. So that's where the TAP was born and created. And it's, of course, been revised a multitude of times. And in fact, I just finished a tracking study and everything. So, you continue to refine the product and everything, but that's where it started. And boy, what a great ride.
Yeah, I'd say a great ride. All right. Over 30 plus years of people, using this. I mean, that experience that you have kind of put into all of the assessment. So for the listeners, Doctor, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit more about TAP. I mean, they're hearing about it from Brandon, but, how does it work? What's the goal of the assessment? Right.
Well, and of course, I'm known for and where the origin came from was to help. It was strictly NFL to start with.
Yep.
Well, let's back up. So I coached football at the school that I was a professor and the department chair, and we were really good. We went to a national championship, and that was in 82. And then in 83, we made it real far. We actually were better, but we underperformed. And I got hired that year by the Chiefs. And so originally the goal was not to do anything with the draft. It was to help players transition from football to their second careers, finish degrees, et cetera. But I'm walking by scouting and they're like pulling their hair out. I wish we knew this about this guy, and I wish we knew that. And I go, I do that for banks, for tellers. I mean, come on, man, get with the times. And so they're like, really? You can do that? And so, that's where it started and everything. But originally it was really just for the draft. Did we want this guy in the locker room? Is he going to, he got all the God-given talent in the world, but is he going to underachieve, overachieve? And, back then it was 12 rounds. And so we would really make our gravy in those later rounds because, the guy might be short-armed, short-legged, look like a cowboy or something when you watch him walk. But, the guy had all the heart in the world, and those people made it in the league. And so it slowly caught on. So originally it was just, the draft part, but there was all this information there. It's like, why stop once you draft a guy? You know what he's made of now. Let's use it for coaching and development and, the whole 9 yards. And so that became kind of my mission, if you will. So what now what? Yes. Is what I always say. And so, okay, well, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses, go work on this. That's the now what, So and teams are gradually coming around to that. But anyhow, I started at the pros, and it was NFL and then baseball, and that was an NFL connection. I got into Major League Baseball and then NBA. And then a lot of my guys in the NFL, went on to become college coaches like Saban. I worked with him at Michigan State and LSU and so on and so forth. I had Purdue because the guy had called Bill Polian and read my report and goes, "Who is this Troutwine dude? He knows him better. I've been coaching this kid for 4 friggin' years, And so anyhow, I did them in Georgia, So then I became aware of my new passion, which was we got to get this in the hands of amateur athletes. When they come to us in the NFL,
right?
They're pretty much all those behavior patterns are crystallized and, a leopard does not change its spots. But if we can get these kids when they're 13, 14, 15 to awareness, right? The tap will tell you that. And then the so what, now what? Now we need to go work on these things. Just like you guys said, I didn't have anything like that. And I played football, I wrestled, and I ran track. And I loved football, but I was actually the best sport was wrestling. But man, I'd almost vomit before a match and just tighter than a bridge bolt, So, you can patent that one. Nobody.
That's great.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, Doctor, what was it about this particular list? You mentioned it changes all the time. Where do you kind of find the list of intangibles? Is it something just from, of course you had that experience in coaching, and I'm sure just the researcher in you is always asking and talking to coaches, and you're paying attention to the conversations that you're having with, coaches and asking them, about different intangibles they're looking for in athletes. But how did you come up with the original list to begin with? Was it just purely just based on observation? Was it a questionnaire?
Yeah, I don't know if you know what the term empiricist means, but we're pretty much atheoretical. We don't really start off with a theory, but yet at the same time, it's kind of good to have a little sense of direction. But you don't make a lot of theoretical assumptions and go, oh, well, I'm going to, I've already decided the tap's going to have, I don't know, dominance, let's say, a very popular scale and personality test. So no, it was just like, let's see what really matters. And so, there are a lot of scales. I knew some of them probably wouldn't matter, but, and then time changes because when I started, I had a work ethic scale with associated questions. Well, everybody had a good work ethic in the NFL. So it didn't distinguish. And my job was to distinguish, the people that were lazy versus the hard workers. Well, it's a constant. You can't predict when a variable is a constant. Everybody's got 2 arms, pretty much everybody. But so that doesn't do you any good and everything. But over time, so anyhow, work habits is still on the tap. But now we do have work ethic because over time, generations changed. And so that's just a really good example of why we need to keep taking the temperature and, COVID, as you can imagine. I don't even pretend to know all the outcomes that's going to create.
I agree.
So, we're very, very tuned into that. And obviously in the NCAA, the transfer portal, and then now the NIL. And luckily we got ahead of the curve on that a little bit. And so we have some products that address that, but that's going to be a total game changer. And I don't know what to predict. I think we might in the future see a Power 4 rather than a Power 5, but that's my little crystal ball.
It's interesting you bring up NIL, and this was not on my list of questions to talk to you about today, but you just made me think about something. I wonder, and I'm sure there's a whole path you could go down about individuals that really are driven by NIL, right? Like that is their motor. That's the thing that's going to, and how that separates them from that person who, more organically is just, the love of the game kind of you know what I mean? Like, I could see that definitely being something that all of a sudden now in the future, NFL guys are going to be looking at, like, this person that it seems to be in it for all of those reasons versus just the pure competitiveness piece. Yeah.
It's really interesting. And then obviously you have the parents in that formula. And, and if I'm a dad of a blue chipper, what do you tell them to do? Well, go to Jackson State, Dion with all his connections, you might be better off there than Ohio State, Right. So it's going to be very interesting. It'll be a cool social experiment. Cool.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and because you think too, I mean, we've heard it for so many years about, especially like when NBA players, because they seem to be the guys that were able to get drafted the youngest and see the most wealth early on, and how that affected or shaped their drive, right? If they take the TAP test prior to a big contract or getting an NIL deal or whatever, they may be, maybe they're a maverick, right? But then as soon as they take it and now they get some money and we're 3 years down the road, how has that shaped or, changed their competitive landscape?
Right. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see, but we, and before this happened, one of my NFL clients, longstanding, the bottom line question is, but do they love football?
Right.
And they won't draft a guy if they feel like he doesn't love football. And, so luckily, with that kind of intro, we've been looking at that long and hard for a long time. Do they love the sport for intrinsic reasons and everything? But that's a tough nut to crack.
So, Doctor, we talked about this a little bit a minute ago, as far as the assessment goes. It's 100 questions, timed exercise, takes approximately 25 minutes to complete. And I love the direction you're going, by the way, as it relates to the young athletes, because Brandon and I talk about this on the show all the time, how, anxiety. I mean, you're seeing some of the mental issues that are happening right now in younger athletes more and more. I mean, you have some incredible data on your website, the Riser website, that talks about the fact that, and I thought this was really fascinating, that, from 2013 to 2022, the TAP mental toughness scores that you all have received are down 12% over that span. And then, you kind of add that to the fact that on the same website, you all have the recent NCAA survey that references more than 50% of college athletes suffer from overwhelming anxiety and other mental issues. And it's incredible. I mean, why do you think we're starting to see this? I mean, you're the researcher. Like, what is that kind of catalyst for some of the mental issues, the anxiety, all of a sudden, the things we're starting to see in the younger athletes?
Yeah, I don't know. And that's one thing when I talk to audiences, it's one of the first things I tell people is I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. Right. I got a call from a Power 5 coach. He was not a client, and he's like, we practice hard. I have no static, but on game day, we just fold. I want to know why. I go, Coach, I got nothing. He goes, well, what should I do? Well, you need to fire all your starters and play your Rudies. Well, I'll get fired. Well, he got fired anyhow. So I don't know why. And I kind of experienced it, boots on the ground. So we had a college team using our product, and they were local. So I kind of became a volunteer coach for a year just to see how the kids were interacting with the tap and some of our training modules and so on. And I'm a gym rat. So they knew that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I came in there. Well, pretty soon they're all lined up and they want to talk to me. And guess what they wanted to talk about? Anxiety. And it's like, guys, you're in college. I had so much fun. Right. And you're worried about your shoestrings. So I don't really, I know it's an epidemic. And I don't know all the reasons because every case was, a different reason. Parents putting pressure on, the kid just having total unrealistic expectations. You got a 12 on the ACT, but you want to be pre-med. Right. So I don't know,
and you got social media that plays.
Well, I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
Right. And they don't want to be embarrassed.
Right. Everybody, I just think there's a whole, we could do a whole show on, it's called the professionalism in youth sports. And this movement started around 1980, and this is like, okay, you can play soccer year round, right? Mm-hmm. Indoor, outdoor, you can find a tournament anywhere and these teams travel. They all have nice matching uniforms. And I could go, the coaches are paid, the parents pay the coaches. Right. And it's called the professionalism of youth sports. And it's led to a lot of issues because of year-round competition. I mean, if you want to start a new business, go into orthopedics because athletic injuries are skyrocketing because of overuse injuries and then psychologically burnout and everything, burnout, rust out. And so I blame a lot of it on that whole thing that's happening. And in the Troutwine household, we had a rule because like my oldest son, he swam and he played soccer. Well, both sports are year round. And I would get calls from parents and the coach, like, it's unfair. Your son is competing against people that do that sport year round. I go, sorry. In the Troutwine household, we have an off season. You can play the piano. You can lay on the couch. You can play a different sport. You're having an off season, buddy, because, I go back to overuse injuries,
Yeah.
And swimming, of course, is probably one of the best in terms of low impact, but, soccer, you name it. Every sport it's year round competition. And so those kids, they come out of that funnel after that whole societal youth, thing. And, I guess a lot of it's, I think, self-driven, the anxiety, unrealistic expectations, but definitely social media is a big problem, I think, in terms of what we're talking about. I'm not against social media, but
right.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, though, too, Doc, is when we talk to coaches and what they're looking for in terms of an athlete and a recruit, none of them, I haven't heard one yet, and John, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I haven't heard one yet that says we're looking for a single-threaded athlete. Like, they all want to see, to your point, hey, he swims and he's in soccer. Oh, and he also has these other interests and hobbies. Is that kind of what you hear? Or, I mean, I'm thinking the NFL, Major League Baseball, all of them, those dudes that are on the sidelines and in those dugouts, I think most of them played multiple sports growing up.
Yeah. Well, there's actually some pretty solid scientific evidence to support what you're saying, that, that multi-sport athlete, has a better chance. We actually do a partnership with a firm, and if those kids ran track, it's called tracking football. It's amazing how much higher their success level is and everything. And they've even had some predictors like, is it Hunt, the really fast guy that was at the Chiefs and he went to the Dolphins.
Right.
Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. And he won his state's broad jump. And it was amazing. Like, he leaped almost 40 feet. It's like, holy cow, so little things like that. But yeah, I think there's a multitude of reasons, physically and psychologically, why those multi-sport athletes, that's who you really want to look at. And, going back to wrestling and football, I mean, I love linemen who wrestle, because they already know you drop your ass, to get that center of gravity lower, and all that leverage stuff. And it's just second nature. You don't have to coach it, and that type of thing. So yeah, it's really interesting. Those, and then that is one of the features of the professionalism of youth sports, is the early specialization. But I talk to high school coaches all the time, and you hardly ever see a kid walking through the hallways that had lettered in 3 sports. Right. And that was just amazing, common deal in my.
I agree 100%. And even once you got to college, we had Jack Leggett on the show, and somebody who had played multiple sports in college. And it's amazing. So for the listeners, just to go back to the TAP assessment, what Dr. Troutwine's talking about here is you take the questionnaire, you have the timed exercise. It gives you kind of a list. It evaluates a list of intangibles. You've got things you mentioned some earlier: attention to detail, coachability, decisiveness, focus, speed, grit, all those things. And then it spits out an assessment of an athlete type, and you've got different ones like Eagle, which is a responsible athlete. You have Knight, which is a protective athlete type, Maverick, dynamic athlete. And what I love about this whole concept is that it matches you to other athletes, right? Famous athletes, Mike Trout, Peyton Manning, some of those folks. And I love that so much, because we talk all the time about how athletes become this identity of, their label, whatever it is, football player. In this case, it might be, I'm an engineer, I'm a Maverick, whatever. But being able to see that and understanding, hey, this individual made it no matter what they were assigned, what label they were assigned. They made it. They dealt with some of the struggles, the same struggles that Peyton Manning had or Mike Trout had. And then I like the fact that where you guys are going with this at Riser is you're saying now, okay, this is where you are presently, but you have an opportunity to develop, and you can even become a hybrid, So right. Talk to us a little bit more about maybe some of those athletic types and how you all kind of work to develop those.
Yeah, well, the work behind it is it's actually pretty hard to describe, because the TAP, if you look at the, let's raise the hood for a minute and everything. So there's 14 scales. I guess that, would be like the DNA. So it's called cluster analysis, discriminant analysis, multivariate analysis. But we used all those statistical tools. But if you can imagine a universe, we got this new telescope that's doing cool stuff. Right. And so people kind of cluster into galaxies. And frankly, I was hoping it would be fewer than 8, but we found that there are 8 clusters, and you might be right in the center, or you might be kind of on the fringe. And again, I can't think in 14 dimensions like my stats professor. He said, look at the corner of a ceiling, see the X, Y, Z axis. Now imagine one perpendicular. I about got up and walked out of the class. I can't do it, coach.
I'm done.
Yeah. All right. So anyhow, to be nerdy about it. So anyhow, 14 dimensions. where are these clusters? And so we found, like I said, I was hoping it'd be fewer just because it's easier to remember,
Sure.
And, but it happened to be 8. And yeah, you can obviously you almost hope that somebody, as they grow and develop, they might not retain that primary athlete type. They might move. And that's why we do show on the report your secondary.
Right.
And everything. And then we also have another cool feature in our team reports. It's called player matching, but it's very popular with our college clients because a new recruit comes on campus. The system will tell you, well, Bob Troutwine's just like Harry, who I coached before. And, you can put all your alumni in the database and your current roster, and it'll match you up. And, I've got coaches coming up and going, you just saved me 2.5 years.
Isn't that something? Of
trial and error coaching, just to figure out what makes this cat tick. And you told me he's just like, Benjamin Tate that I coached before. Oh, okay. And so that's even better than just the athlete type, but the athlete type also. And then a couple of little stories on the athlete type, like Sporting KC, they love it so much. The player's locker has the name, picture, and the athlete type. And then they do these fun little exercises, but we have a compatibility chart, and the director of ops, he was responsible for assigning roommates at training camp. And he said, usually I'd get about 17 requests. I can't room with Troutwine. He's a slob. And so, or whatever, a lot worse. I'm going to keep it G-rated.
Right.
But guess what? Zero transfers using that darn And trust me, I don't think it's that robust, but it worked. But yeah, it's crazy. So we discovered the 8 athlete types, and I would say this: don't ever make a selection decision based on the athlete type, because like you said, every type can be successful and everything. But I think from a coaching, parenting, and even for the athlete, just it kind of gives you that framework that, okay, in which you can then understand those more granular results in your TAP report that are very individualized. But like I said, I mean, I was a little bit actually reluctant to make that a big part of our product because I thought it was a little too cutesy.
Okay.
I don't know. I just want the user to read deep into their results because that's the real you,
right.
Instead of saying, well, I'm kind of an engineer or I'm kind of a rocket. But it's been very useful. And I know, I'm amazed at coaches that will come up with their own observations, and they'll say something like, and I think it was a night, this guy was a soccer coach in college, and he said, I like nights as long as everything's going good, they are great. But when things go bad, they're like, really? Because I never said that. I mean, he had, observed that. So it gave him, like I said, a conceptual framework to relate to his players. And so, that's a very positive thing.
It's really interesting too, as a user, and to see, like, for my son, the fact that there are ways to train certain behaviors or accentuate certain things. Is there an athlete type, Doc, that people are really looking to as a coach? Is there one of those 8? Because like you said, there are success stories in every single one of them, but is there one that they kind of gravitate towards?
No, I haven't heard that. And I guess the closest I've heard to anything like that is we had a coach at Michigan State, and she knew her athlete type, and she just said she had a hard time with, athlete type X.
Okay.
But that was one single little anecdotal thing. And
sure.
And again, I kept telling her, well, don't, if you got a good player, and she's athlete type X, you still need to take her, and everything. You just know it, and I think that's good for coaches to have that self-awareness too, because like when I coached, I hated whiners. That was my hot button. Yep. And with today's athlete and all this anxiety, they're going to whine, and you got to let them vent and everything. But, I'm the old school guy, just rub some dirt on it, get back in there,
Well, but and every team has a role, right? Like every player, I mean, you need all different types.
Right. Exactly.
To make that engine run right. So,
well, and that's what I love about and you're both kind of dancing around this here, is that's what I love about the assessment too, is that it gives that guidance to the parent, the coach. I mean, as part of that assessment, it teaches them and provides some of the insights into, best way to help their athletes navigate some of the ups and downs. I mean, we talk all the time about parents are that first mental performance evaluator or coach, if you think about it, as helping the athlete debrief their day, do an assessment on how things are making them feel, or what types of responses they're having to certain situations in their lives. And so I can when I'm looking over this information, I'm thinking, man, as a parent and a coach, how valuable that would be to be able to know some of those, have that insight and be able to help them with relationships, or better motivating and developing their interests and all of those good things. Have you guys taken it? You just made me think about this when the coach called you and asked you the question, but have you guys taking it to another level there as far as developing any programs that help those coaches or parents to, deal with particular athlete types? Is that the next evolution of this, you think?
Well, we have some, it's actually published on the website, but we do have, like if you looked at, let's just pick ice, for instance, that athlete type, there will be a tab for the parent. And then we have like 8 categories, like after a setback, after a mistake, what should the parent do? And then also a tab, and then we can tell the coach, and then the player too, the athlete. So that's as far as we've gone, but it's pretty good. And I do want to spend a minute talking about the parents. And I'm sure you've heard about the New York Times did a study. And I had actually worked with the National Federation of High Schools, and 60% of athletes quit their sophomore year in high school. And anyhow, the New York Times study, why did you quit your sport? And it was a ride home with dad or mom. It's just horrible. And so what we're trying to do is get the parent out of the way, if you will, to let your kid thrive. And, you have to be on the sidelines. You can't go out there and play. Yep. So don't coach from the sidelines. We've all been out there. Right. We see it every game. The kid's looking at his dad or his mom instead of the coach. And so get on the sidelines and then be supportive, and everything. And probably you don't want to do the film study on the way home. You missed that block. Oh, you missed that kick. There's a time and place for that. So I feel very passionate about, our parent product, and I hope parents read it. I have 3 kids, 6 grandkids, but we're not objective. And the first thing, the most natural instinct of a parent is to protect your child. Well, you think you're protecting them, but, often it's really bad. And so I really think the parents should heed the tips and advice we give. And, and we get some pushback, to be honest. Really? You're saying Johnny's not competitive, but he is. No, Dad. Right. You're the competitive one.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's so true. I'm so glad you brought that up, because it is, I talk about this all the time about the reason a lot of those college athletes that leave after the first semester, once they get there, is they left their engine at home, right? Their engine was that parent.
Right.
And so now they get to school and they realize this isn't that fun, or I don't enjoy going to practice. I can't go do all these things because the thing that was propelling me is at home, because it was never about their dream.
Right.
It was always just a manifestation of what the parent had. The other thing I thought was really cool about this, and guys, as Brandon pointed out, go to riser.com. You can find all the information on there about the Troutwine Athletic Profiler, the TAP test as it's better known. But it's really cool because when you sign in and you register and you take the assessment, not only do you get all this valuable information from the website, but you also get put into leaderboards. And what was very interesting to me when I was looking at the leaderboards is, I'm looking right now at, say, baseball mental confidence, because that's become such a big thing in baseball is, how do I get more confident players? And the top 9, the tops that all scored 99, for example, they're all different athlete types. Like, that's the cool thing about it is that athlete type label doesn't mean that you're the most confident or you're the better coach, in coachability or whatever the case may be. So that's all really interesting. I want to, and just to one other little thing I wanted to mention here is that when you think about having access to this profiler, and I'm going to say something on your behalf, Dr. Troutwine, is the fact that, guys, when you're listening at home, you're a parent or a coach, this is literally the same assessments that a lot of the NFL players are taking as part of the combines, that a lot of NFL teams are continuously taking, that Bill Belichick, for example, used specifically to help build rosters at New England, and it provided insights into Tom Brady's strong mental intangibles in the 2000 draft. I mean, that's incredible. When I read some of the stories about this was used by Bill Polian, for example, the same assessment and this type of information to make the decision about Peyton Manning over Ryan Leaf, for example, in the 1998 draft. What was it, do you remember or recall, about like somebody like Tom Brady? Like, what were some of the things that they see, or that an assessment like this would pull out, that everybody is always trying to figure out what's the it factor when it comes to Brady, right?
Right. Yeah. And Brady, it's such a mosh pit at the combine, the way they used to do it. So we're just grabbing players, and finally they got to where they organized it and the players have a schedule. But back in the day, you would grab people and bring them to the room, and I had my runner, so I'm running the testing room. And so he came in and basically just sat down and took it. I had very little interaction, so I didn't have enough, of an interaction to really, have an impression one way or the other. For some reason, Peyton and Ryan Leaf stand out a lot more. I remember a lot about them. Same with Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin. Just they interacted more. And we used to, you took the test, and at the end, there's the speed concentration where like the word red is in green, and you're supposed to say green and ignore the word. But we used to do that face to face, and it was a blast. And Ben Roethlisberger, so it's the primary colors, and for some reason he's in there with all the D linemen, and he's like going through it: red, black, green, orange. Says the F-bomb. Throws the thing up. There is no orange. I told my buddy about that, and he put him in his fantasy football deal and won the league.
That's awesome.
Just Troy Polamalu. I just remember he would whisper and everything. And I thought, man, that guy's little, but the more I sat there, I became like the mouse and he became like the mountain and everything. It was like, wow, there's some hidden intensity. I loved giving the color tests. It's the whole point of that story. But anyhow, yeah, it was all based on their TAP results, whether it was Brady or Leaf or Manning, and everything. And I loved working with Bill Polian because he would throughout these scenarios. So I'm sitting in the war room, and he's like, we go through everything on the Leaf and Manning deal, and I can tell he's not even, he knows stuff. They did all their background due diligence, and he goes, okay, well, what if of these two guys, our line is horrible. The guy's going to be running for his life until we, get some good linemen in here. Mm-hmm. How's he going to respond? And so it was that approach where Bill was just, I call it pepper, in baseball, how you play pepper. And he's peppering me with all these questions that I've never even looked through that lens at the guy's results. And it became clear, who we should take and who we should avoid, and everything. So I give him, he deserves the majority of the credit,
That's an incredible story. You mentioned the list of athletes there. Is there one that stands out or two across the time that you've been involved with the NFL combines that just were off the charts with all the majority of these intangibles? I mean, is there anybody that would be on that kind of Mount Rushmore of TAP scores, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. It's more the funny stories that stick in my mind. But Brian Urlacher was, he's on the all Troutwine team.
That's awesome. Yeah. You need to do that. Like the all
that would be pretty cool, Doc.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can see where I could see where Urlacher would be.
That guy, I loved him. I love Junior Seau. Mm-hmm. I got some stories on that dude, but I just absolutely loved him. Bob something, the safety at the Colts. He played at Iowa.
Yeah.
He was a beast.
Absolute animal, and just ended up playing so hard that it shortened his career.
It did. And I love Stan Humphries, and I wonder whatever happened to him. I'm sure he's concussed to no end. But yeah. Bob, he played at Iowa, and I didn't know this until years later, and I was bragging about him, and they go, at practice, he wouldn't go half speed. And so they would actually have to pull him off the field because he was hurting his teammates. He only had one gear.
Bob Sanders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I tell you what, we really, we could go on and on about some of these stories. And we'll definitely, want to have you back at some point, and we can talk a little bit more about some of these things, because I'm just fascinated at not only the level of detail that you guys are putting into that, that you put into that assessment, but just how you've been open. We talk all the time about the growth mindset. You've been open to that too in this assessment. I mean, you've taken some of that feedback from Polian and some of the guys over the years and said, hey, maybe this is something else we could put in here from an intangible standpoint, or this is a way that we can continue to evolve the assessment. But I really can't stress enough to the listeners that you have access to a tool that is literally used to make millions and $million decisions. Like, this is the type of insight that you're going to be able to get with your own athletes, and not just athletics. We talked about athletics, but I'm sure there's some insights, Doctor, that we could pull in the business realm. We have a lot of business leaders that are on listen to the show. There are some things that are out there, I'm sure, as far as the business world goes. Is that correct?
Yeah. And, back to my passion about getting to these youngsters when they're 13 and 14. These are life skills.
Yeah.
It's not just walking up to the plate, we're down 2 runs and the bases are loaded. In your career, you're going to have pressure moments. And so how you handle that and everything. And so, if we can really make a difference, I'm talking to the Girls and Boys Club here locally to help some of those inner city kids that are really, they only maybe don't have but one parent and so on. And, just these are things that can help you your whole lifetime, and I always, in a workshop, I'll say, draw a rectangle and put 6 dots on there. Who's on your board of directors, your personal board of directors, your mom, your dad, your preacher. But it's, if you played sports, it's your coach. And so I think athletics is one of the most wonderful vehicles to reach young people and start to craft and mold these things that are so important to get through life. It's not just to get through the game. And so that's where the old heartbeat's coming from on this end. Yeah,
I think you're spot on. And I think it's a great way to wrap this one up because it's really, really so critical. And we're seeing the research doesn't lie, right? I mean, we're seeing these mental health issues, all of the mental performance challenges with so many of the young athletes. And if we can get to them sooner, then maybe we can change that curve a little bit. And that's something I know you're passionate about and something that I know a lot of parents and coaches out there are passionate about as well. So we can't thank you enough. This has gone by. I mean, awesome. The hour went by way too fast.
Way too quick.
But
I'm just getting started.
Hey, I was going to say, well, hey, listen, let us know what you're doing next week. We'll have you back.
Right. I was going to say that's the wrong thing to tell us.
Yeah.
There's always part 2 in our future. So we'll definitely get you back on to tell some more of those NFL Combine stories and some of the things that we're doing, kind of branches, ways that people can take this, because we're all about systems and strategies here. So anything people can take from this, the insights, and then we'll start to unpack it even further in the future would be great. So we can't thank you enough for taking some time to join us today.
All right. Really appreciate it, Doc. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.